All right, good morning everyone, and good evening to those of you in a different time zone. Morning, I am Paddy Robertson. I am the CEO of SmartAir, and today I'm going to be taking you through a little bit about the coronavirus, air purifiers, masks, and really just how we can protect ourselves from the virus and stay healthy in general during this period. So SmartAir, we're holding this live stream today because we've been asked a lot of questions about the virus, about masks, about air purifiers, and we wanted to share this information back with some of you, some of our fans, some of our users, and anybody listening to give you a little bit more information on the coronavirus. So let me start with just a brief intro about myself. So I am from the UK. I am from Wales originally. I've been in China for just over 5 years now, running SmartAir. So I've been here running air pollution related activities just for a little over 4 to 5 years now. And SmartAir, who are we at SmartAir? For those of you listening who don't know, we are a social enterprise. That means we are focused on providing social impact and benefit to people, as opposed to just your regular company that cares about making money. And we do two things. We provide simple, effective air purifiers and masks. We have one of our air purifiers, the square here behind me, in countries including China, India, Philippines, Mongolia, as well as a few more countries where we have distributors, Thailand, Pakistan, and a few other places. We also have offices in Bangladesh as of just a few weeks ago. So that's one thing that we do. And the second thing that we do is we provide simple, easy to understand information on air pollution and on how we can protect ourselves from bad air quality. So this coronavirus, obviously, it's taken us all by surprise, and it really is related also to air quality and to the air that we breathe. So that's why we're doing what we can to help provide you all with some information. So that's enough about me. Let me jump straight into answering some of your questions that we've had. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below, and we will get through, hopefully I will get through to answering some of those at the end of this live stream. So let me start basically very simply with viruses, or the coronavirus, and air pollution. Air purifiers. Air purifiers is something that we at SmartAir have done for over 7 years. We started by making DIY air purifiers, very simple fan and filter. These air purifiers are very simple technology. They don't need to cost a lot of money. They were invented over 70 years ago. So you should all be aware that breathing clean air at home is very, very simple, very, very easy, and very, very effective. So let me start by talking about viruses and air purifiers. And more importantly, can air purifiers actually capture the viruses? So let me start by saying what are air purifiers? As I've said, they're a fan and a filter. And the HEPA filter, which is one of these, which is what you find inside most of your air purifiers. Here's one of the HEPA filters actually that comes out of the square here. And it's very simple. This was actually invented 70 years ago in the US by the US government. There's no patents on it. It's very simple tech. It's essentially just a mat of randomly aligned fibers that can capture the particles. So this is basically what will be capturing viruses, if at all, in your air purifier. Now, to answer whether or not this can capture, we need to know how big the viruses actually are. So let me bring up another picture here. And this is showing the size of the virus. You can see down here, coronavirus, all the way on the left of your picture, 0.1 microns. So that's actually, we're talking much, much smaller than PM 2.5, which is what a lot of us hear about in the news, and much, much smaller even than the width of a human hair. So these viruses are really, really, really small. So the question is, can these air purifiers actually capture these viruses? And in fact, the answer to that, we can look to a study done by NASA, or some research done by NASA, where they found that actually HEPA filters were able to capture 99.99% of 5 nanometer particles. So how small is that? Right. I'm sorry, I think the feed might be a bit slow. Give me 1 second. Let me just switch over. Okay, things should be back now, hopefully. So NASA was able to find that the HEPA filters were able to capture 99.99% of these tiny, tiny particles, 0.3 microns in size. Hello guys, are you, can you hear me now? Am I back online? Sorry about that. There was an issue with internet. So I'm streaming this live from China right now, and connecting to Facebook has some issues from China. So hopefully we're back online now, and you all can see this. So I was just saying that HEPA filters, they're able to capture over 99.99% of those tiny 5 nanometer particles. So this is a test done by NASA. Now, today I'm going to be going through a lot of numbers, and essentially the purpose of this, I'm not asking you to trust what I say. I'm no expert in air pollution. What I'm asking you to do is to look at the data, look at the numbers, and make up your own mind. So just like reading the news now, there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of information which maybe doesn't come from credible sources. I will try and give you guys the sources today to make up your own decisions and make up your own mind. So this comes from a NASA survey, but again, you don't probably have to believe what they say. Here is a graph actually showing in detail HEPA filters and furnace filters and how good they are at capturing these tiny, tiny 0.01 microns even particles. So it's a pretty complicated graph. I won't keep it on there too long to bore you too much. So in essence, yes, air purifiers can capture the viruses, which is great news. So another question a lot of people have is, all right, so we can capture the viruses, this HEPA filter can capture the viruses, but you know, won't these viruses just maybe come back out into the air? Isn't this HEPA filter now really, really dangerous as a kind of a harbor for these viruses? What if they come back in the air? What if we touch it and then we get infected ourselves? So actually, this is a very, very common question, and I can answer it in 2 parts. Essentially, first of all, how long can viruses stay alive for? And here's a graph essentially showing the viability of viruses. That's a fancy way of saying how long these viruses can live for or infect us, and on different materials. So here you can see a graph showing how long viruses can live on plastic, on pine, on a computer keyboard, and on J-cloth. So J-cloth is probably the most similar to the material in a HEPA filter. It's kind of a cloth-like material. Normally you'd use J-cloths for wiping down surfaces. And this graph shows that they generally survive roughly 4 hours on this kind of surface. So actually, if your HEPA filter does capture viruses, most likely after about 4 hours, the virus will have already died and it won't be effective. So that's one part answer to that question, whether or not the HEPA filter itself can become dangerous. The second part is, well, actually, can the viruses actually even come out? And a bunch of researchers did some tests, and they looked at whether or not these tiny, tiny particles can come out. And let me just show you a electron microscopy photo of a HEPA filter. And you can see inside here, you can see these HEPA fibers in there. And these 3 tiny dots on the front of one of the fibers, those are actually tiny, tiny particles. Those are plutonium particles, roughly 0.2 or 0.3 microns in size. And you can see they're tiny compared with the fiber, the size of the fiber. So actually these particles are so small that as soon as they touch the fiber, it's very, very unlikely that they will come off and that they will get dislodged back into the air. And in fact, these researchers found that even after shocking the HEPA filter and shaking it, these fibers didn't come out. So we've got pretty conclusive evidence here that HEPA filters and air purifiers can capture viruses, first of all, and secondly, it's very unlikely that the viruses from the HEPA filter will come back out into the air. And what's more, they'll probably die after about 4 hours. So that's a very quick lowdown on air purifiers. Just to summarize, so is it worth us using our air purifier when we're at home? Well, I mean, if you're at home, if you're in a closed environment just with your family members, then it's probably not going to have that big a difference on cleaning the air from viruses, because you're going to have many, many more different ways in which you can potentially receive the virus. For example, touching surfaces or through eating, or with close contact with your family. But if you're in public spaces or in your office or in cafes or in these kind of places, running your air purifier may well help. to filter out any viruses that might be in the air. Of course, if where you're living is actually very polluted right now, like today in Beijing, we're looking at over 40 micrograms, 4 times the World Health Organization level. So it probably is still worthwhile. People in India, people in Philippines, Mongolia, Bangladesh, it probably is worthwhile you keeping your air purifier turned on right now. So that's enough about air purifiers. I'm going to move on and talk about masks, which I think is something that we probably all want to know more about. Let me start just by throwing up this question, and this is something that I can't get this question up. But there was a tweet by the U.S. Surgeon General, who actually said that stop buying masks. Masks don't work. So the Surgeon General was telling people in the U.S. not to buy masks because they don't work. So today I'm going to take you through some data and show you why the U.S. Surgeon General was wrong, and give you what you need to know to protect yourselves from from the virus. So first things first, let me start by answering whether or not masks can capture these tiny, tiny particles. So there's a group of researchers in Edinburgh University in the UK. What they did is they took a diesel generator, put a pipe on the end, and then fitted different types of masks to the end of that pipe. And they used a particle counter, which measured down to 0.007 particles. Here it is. Which showed the effectiveness of different materials at filtering those particles. So this is down to 0.007 microns. That's 7 nanometers, or roughly 5 to 10 times smaller than the coronavirus. So really, really small. And what we can see from this data is the cotton handkerchief did a reasonable job, 30% of capturing those particles. Surgical masks did pretty well, 80%. And some of the the more industrial grade masks managed to capture over 90%, 95% of these really, really small particles. So that's great news. So yes, these masks are actually able to filter out and capture the viruses. But that's only the first part of the question. Maybe this mask that I have here is actually able to filter out the viruses. But when you're wearing it, is it actually going to protect me? Is it possible that the viruses are going to leak around the edge, or that I may get infected some other ways? So to answer that question, we need to look at whether or not these masks, be it a surgical mask or be it a N95 mask, whether or not these are effective at actually preventing the transmission of viruses. And I'm going to bring up a poll now, and ask you guys whether or not you think N95 masks or surgical masks are more effective at preventing the transmission of viruses. So we're going to go ahead and put out a poll, and you guys can, in real time, you guys can answer this question, whether or not you think surgical masks or N95 masks are more effective. So I've just shown you, if you look at the data in this picture, N95 masks can filter out more of the particles. They can filter out roughly 95% of these tiny viruses, whereas the surgical mask listed here can only filter out about 80%. So which one do you think is better? Or do you think that none of them actually are any good at filtering out, preventing us from getting transmission of the viruses? So which ones do you think? Go ahead and join the poll now, answer these questions, and let's see the stats that we get in. So 2 people have actually said that they think surgical masks are better. 1 person said they think N95 masks. I'll give everyone maybe a couple more minutes to answer these questions, and then we'll see the results that we get. So surgical masks, N95, or neither of them are effective at all at preventing influenza transmission. Pretty interesting here. It looks like more people here are saying surgical masks. We also asked this question on Twitter, and most people on Twitter said that they thought that the N95 mask would be better at preventing the transmission of viruses. Now that's pretty understandable, because these kind of masks can actually capture more of the particles. They do a better job of capturing the viruses. But actually, I've led you on a little bit of a wild goose chase, or I've misled you a little bit here. And actually, the answer is that both of these mask types are really good at capturing and preventing the transmission of viruses. So actually, here's a study done in the US with 2,862 nurses, and they got different people to wear the N95 mask and the surgical mask, and what they wanted to do was to see which one was more effective in preventing the transmission of viruses. And they found that the transmission rate, so we can see here, of N95 masks was 8%, and that of medical masks was 7%. So actually, the two masks did pretty much exactly the same. They did just as well as preventing the transmission of viruses. Now that's just one study. You don't have to believe it, but let me show you another study. So here's another study done with nurses in Canada, this time with a slightly smaller number, roughly 400. But they found, here you can see the 20 and the 22, they found that the transmission rate for surgical masks was roughly 20%, and that for N95 masks was 22%. So they actually found in both these tests that surgical masks and N95 masks work just as well at preventing the transmission of viruses. So US Surgeon General, please check out the data. We'll send you a tweet after this telling you to check out the data before making claims, and always check the data and don't just believe what you read in other places. Okay, so these kind of masks we can see are pretty good at capturing and preventing the transmission of viruses. But why were the masks just as good? Or why was the surgical mask, which clearly has a lower filtration, just as good as the N95 mask? And actually it comes down to the fact that we don't know. The scientists themselves were stumped and they didn't know why this was. And what they thought, or what they suggested was that potentially any of these masks, be it an N95 or a surgical mask, can actually prevent us from touching our face. And that might be one of the biggest contributing factors in helping reduce the transmission of viruses. So a key bit of information here, unconfirmed with data, but potentially is reducing the amount you touch your face, touch your mouth, touch your eyes and nose will actually drastically reduce the transmission of viruses, and that may well be the biggest factor when wearing a mask, as opposed to whether or not it can filter out the pollution. Now, are there any masks that don't work very well? Well, I want to bring one mask to your attention, which is the Pitta Japanese mask. These are really, really popular in China right now, and I've also seen them pretty popular in Mongolia and in the Philippines as well. These masks look pretty cool. The company got a lot of big models and celebrities to advertise these masks. So earlier on last year, we wanted to see whether or not these masks were good at capturing. Initially, it was PM 2.5, and now it's viruses. And let me show you guys the data. Or first of all, let me show you how we did it. So what we did is we took the Pitta mask, you can see in the middle here. We attached a fan to the mask and we blew air through the mask. Then we measured using a MET1 the amount of air pollution, the amount of 2.5 micron or 0.3 micron particles coming through this mask. And let me show you the data, it's pretty shocking. The Pitta mask here captured 0% of the 0.3 micron particles, 0%. Now an N95, you can see in the middle, captured 93%, so roughly 95%. The N90 on the right captured 91%, 90%, but the Pitta mask captured 0%. So the Pitta mask was useless at capturing 0.3 micron particles. It was a bit better at capturing the slightly larger 2.5 micron particles, 64%, but still not great. So this mask really, really isn't good at capturing virus-sized particles. The Pitta mask really isn't great. So if there's one thing you take away, if you have one of these masks, is it might not help you filter out the viruses. But as I've just said, masks may well have a secondary use in just preventing you touching your face. So if you have nothing else and the Pitta mask is all you have, then it may well be a good option for you to wear, just to help you reduce the amount you touch your face. Okay, so that's a very, very brief overview of masks. We can summarize it showing they can capture the viruses, also that they can prevent the transmission of influenza and viruses, and surgical masks and N95 masks work just as well. And potentially the reason for that is because it helps reduce our the amount we touch our face. And the pitter mask itself is really not great at filtering out the pollution. So next things, I'm going to give you a very brief overview picture of some of the mask standards oh, let me just reduce the size of my video. There you go, you can see all of that now. This is an overview of some of the standards of different kinds of masks that there are. So in China we have what's called single-use masks, which are very, very thin and look like this. And these kind of masks, they're certified generally to capture over 95% of larger particles. So BFE means bacteria filtration efficiency, 3 microns in size. So not virus-sized particles, but bacteria-sized particles. And these generally don't capture, they don't have any requirements to capture viruses. These are probably also prevalent in other countries, especially Southeast Asia. These are maybe the kind of masks that people wear when they're biking to prevent dust and things. So these can be pretty good, 95% at capturing dust, but they're not very good at capturing viruses. Now, surgical masks, we have many, many different standards for surgical masks. Here I've listed China, the US, and Europe, and they all have varying different standards. But generally, for example, in China and Europe, they're again required to capture the bacteria, the larger particles, but not really required to capture the smaller particles, the 0.1 micron particles. However, the US standard, the ASTM F2 100, level 1, level 2, and level 3, do require high level of particle 0.1 micron efficiency. And then how about these respirator masks? These masks we've talked about a little bit already. Generally, there are 2 standards or 3 standards. There's the US NIOSH, and then there's the European standard. So you've probably seen a lot of these numbers being thrown around. N90, N95, N99, N100, FFP1, 2, 3. So you can use this information in this graphic. Take a screenshot now. We'll also share this later on if you want to understand the difference between these different kinds of masks. So let me now move on to talk a little bit about something, maybe a question that's been facing more of us, because, okay, I've talked about which masks work and which masks maybe are the most effective, but actually a lot of us are facing the situation right now where we can't even buy masks, and masks actually aren't available in the shops, and we just have to make use with what we've got. So one of the big questions we've been asked over the past few weeks, few days is, how long can I wear my mask for? So I have one of these, how long can I wear it for? Or do I need to replace it daily or what? So actually we've done tests here at Smarter where we tested an 11-day-old mask. So this was a 3M mask. We used it for 11 days biking around Beijing, cycling, running, really general, pretty heavy use. And then after 11 days, we tested its effectiveness. We found that there was a slight drop in effectiveness, but really not much. So actually from this data, we can see after 11 days, the mask still worked really well at filtering out these tiny particles. But what about longer? 11 days isn't that long. We actually did some follow-up tests in India. So our Smart Air office in India went and did some tests in Mumbai, where they tested a 20-day-old mask and a 30-day-old mask. And they found pretty much exactly the same results, that 20 days and 30 days using the mask for that long really didn't affect its ability to filter out the particles. So that's good news. The conclusion here is that you can use the mask probably up to 30 days without its filtration effectiveness changing. Now there are some cases maybe where that might not be the case. For example, if you damage your mask, or if the straps, maybe if they break and then you can't wear your mask and it doesn't fit well, or it doesn't fit comfortably, that could well be a reason why you need to replace it. But generally, if your mask is in good shape, you'll probably be able to use it for 20 to 30 days. But that's only one side of the story. That might be very useful for air pollution. We know if we want to protect ourselves from air pollution, we can use this mask for potentially up to 30 days. But what about right now when there are maybe viruses in the air? If we're wearing this mask and it becomes contaminated, what should we do then? Should we throw it out, or is there something we can do to this mask to mean we can keep using it? First of all, let's answer the question of how can we know if our mask is contaminated? Now, this is a very, very difficult question to answer, of course. There's no real way we can know other than sending our mask to a lab. But there is a rule of thumb that we can use. And let me show you this data from some researchers in the US that they did some research in hospitals across the US where they measured the amount of viruses or particles from further and further away from a patient's head. So they had a patient in the hospital in bed, and then they measured the amount of particles, the number of particles in the air at different distance from that patient. And we can see along the bottom we have 1 foot, 3 feet, and 6 feet. 6 feet is roughly 2 meters, 3 foot is roughly 1 meter. And we can see, if we look at the smaller size particles, the diameter less than 4.7 microns, the grey part of the graph, we can see that actually after about 6 feet, the particle numbers drops pretty low and actually below the level that is generally considered able to transmit the viruses. So these researchers also came to the conclusion that at a distance of up to 1.829 meters, 6 feet, these small particles, within that range, they were potentially exposed to these small particles, but outside that range, it's very unlikely that they were exposed to the particles. So this is what I call a 2 meter rule of thumb, so roughly 2 meters or 6 feet. So if you're 2 meters or 6 feet when you're outside wearing a mask away from other people, you can be pretty sure, pretty comfortable that it's quite unlikely that your mask will have been infected. So let's put this rule into use now. Let's come up with some examples. So for example, if you're walking around outside, you're on the streets, and you've generally kept 2 meters away from people as you're walking, your mask probably is unlikely to be contaminated. But if you've been on a bus for an hour with lots of people around you, there's potentially a possibility that it's contaminated. If you're wearing it in the office and there are your workers around you but not that close, then it's a bit more difficult, but you can make a judgment whether or not, are there people sneezing, are there people coughing in the open air there. So again, this is by no means a definite rule, but it's a good rule of thumb you can use to whether or not you think your mask has been contaminated. So we've answered that question. Now let's answer the question, what should you do if your mask has been contaminated? First things first, we've had people ask us whether or not they can wash their masks. And here's a test where I did last week, where I actually took, I believe, this mask that I'm holding right now, and I washed it using soapy water, and I scrubbed it and washed it, and I wanted to see whether or not that would affect its efficiency to filter out the particles. And in fact, the data shows, if I show you the data, we measured how good it was before washing and after washing. And we can see that straight after washing, the effectiveness of the mask dropped by roughly 20%. So its ability to filter out those tiny particles really dropped after washing the mask. And what's more, we can't be sure that after washing this mask that we actually managed to kill all of the viruses. So we can't really be sure. So it's A, it's reducing the effectiveness of the mask, and B, we can't be sure that all the viruses have been killed. So what else can we do? How about using alcohol? So we've had people here asking whether or not we can spray alcohol on the mask. And again, that may well work to kill off the viruses. But again, we can't be sure if we've managed to kill all the viruses on the mask. How can we be sure that we've managed to reach every single part of the mask, and make sure all of the viruses on the mask have been killed? So alcohol disinfectant may work. It's unlikely to affect the efficiency of the mask. We've tested that as well. But we can't be sure that we've killed all the viruses. How about some other ways? Two more ways, or one more way that we've seen a lot of people talk about here in China is microwaving. So some researchers, this wasn't with masks, but some researchers found out that if you put a material with viruses in the microwave for no less than 2 minutes at a power of 600 watts, you could deactivate or kill viruses. So 2 minutes at 600 watts, you could kill the viruses. And now I wanted to put that to the test, so I took one of these masks and I wanted to put it in the microwave. But at the start, I had to realize that actually these masks have metal on them. So I first took all the metal off the mask, as you can see in the picture on the right, and then I put this mask in the microwave. And I put it in the microwave for 2 minutes. It started smelling, so I got a little bit worried. But yeah, I put it in for 2 minutes, and I tested its efficiency. And actually, in fact, its efficiency didn't drop. It didn't drop, and it was still able to filter out the particles. But in the process, I've just destroyed my mask. You can see I've just had to take my mask apart. I've had to take the straps off. So microwaving probably isn't a great option if you've seen that online, if you've seen people suggesting that Okay, so what can we do then? What can we do? I've shown you this graph once already, and I'm going to show it to you again and see if any of you can come up with a solution for what we can do to get rid of any viruses that may be on our mask. This graph is showing you again for cloth that viruses can generally die after approximately 4 hours on a cloth type material. So here we have a pretty simple way actually to disinfect our mask, and that is to just leave it for about 4 hours. So if you're short on masks, one thing that I really suggest you do is in the evening when you get home, take your mask off, put it somewhere dry and out of the way where you're not going to touch it. Leave it overnight if you want. 4 hours is the minimum, so we can leave it maybe 10 hours, 12 hours, and then the next day you'll be pretty sure that any viruses on there will have died or they will no longer be viable. Again, it's impossible to say for 100% certainty, but data shows that the viruses generally will be dead or will be no longer viable after approximately 4 hours. Okay, so now we're coming through to our second poll to ask you guys. The second poll is going to go live now, which is about paper towel. So people have been asking, can they use paper towel? You know, maybe people can't even get hold of these N95 masks or these surgical masks, and they want to know what can they use instead to protect themselves. And we've had people asking, can I use paper towel to protect myself from the virus? And we put this to the test. We tested 1 layer and we tested 2 layers of paper towel to see how well it managed to filter out the tiny particles. And we're going to put up a second poll. You guys can answer how well you think the paper was able to filter out the 0.3 micron particles. So do you think it did anything, 0%? Or how about 30%, 50% or 90%? How well do you think this towel, kitchen towel, did at filtering out the tiny particles? We've got one person in here said 30%. What other questions do we have? One person saying 0. Yeah, so this is actually what I thought when I first did the test. 0%. It sounds pretty reasonable. It's just a piece of paper. It's not going to be that good at filtering out these tiny particles, right? Let's give everyone a couple more minutes to see what questions, see what answers you come up with. But yeah, 0% is what I thought. That gives you a clue what you think it might be. I'm gonna show you. So here's the test that I did. I took two layers of this kitchen towel, and I put them on the end of one of our wind tunnels in our Beijing lab and tested the 0.3 micron particles coming through. And actually what I found, so we've had some answers in here, 0%, 30%, somewhere within that range it seems like people are thinking. And I'll show you the answers actually. It was roughly 23% with 1 layer and 33% with 2 layers for the 0.3. So one layer can capture about 20% of those tiny virus particles, and 2 layers did a bit better at 33%. The only thing with 2 layers was it was a little bit harder to breathe through because you've got a lot more paper in front of your face, but it did a little bit better. So this probably isn't the best material, it probably isn't ideal for filtering out the viruses, but it does a reasonable job. And remember, maybe one of the main uses would be that it actually prevents you from touching your face, touching your nose, touching your eyes, which would be a great reason to use the kitchen towel. Now, we do also have more information on other types of materials that can be used to make DIY masks. We will post that. Follow our Facebook. We'll be posting these links on Facebook. They're also on our blog and on our Twitter. You can find an answer where we tested cotton, we tested pillowcases, we tested many normal household materials, and we've got the data all there showing you which material is best for a DIY mask. So check out our links for that follow-up article. So we've talked about this paper, and it does a reasonable job. It can potentially prevent us from touching our face. So I think I've probably mentioned this 2 or 3 times. Touching our face is really important. So maybe one of the most important things for us to remember is wash our hands. I'm sure we've all heard this hundreds of times already. There's some great videos online on YouTube. Check them out. There's some videos. The Vietnam Health Agency put out an awesome video. I suggest you all go check that out on making sure you wash your hands. Now I'm gonna close off this session with one final part about viruses and clothes. We've had people ask us, should I be washing my clothes in disinfectant, or what should I be doing? You know, if I'm out and about, and what if the virus gets on my clothes? What should I be doing? We've actually even had people in China who have been saying, well, you know, maybe I should use alcohol spray, and they've been spraying their clothes with alcohol spray, and this probably not advised because alcohol spray can be flammable, so they're potentially making their clothes flammable, which isn't ideal. So yeah, probably not advised to be spraying your clothes. But what can we do then? I mean, generally we wash our clothes with detergent, and let me show you potentially 3 ways of washing our clothes. Oh, it's a bit difficult to see the text there. Let me bring this back. Can you guys see this now? It's still not that easy. Okay, let me hide this. So there's 3 ways here of washing our clothes. First of all is with detergent. Secondly is with bleach and disinfectant, or detergent and disinfectant. And the third way is just with water and then leaving them out to dry for 20 hours. So I'm going to now open up the third and final poll for you here, which is going to, where I'm asking you guys to tell me which method do you think is best for disinfecting clothes and for removing viruses from clothes. So let me go ahead and open up the third poll, and we'll wait for those answers to come in. So there's these 3 ways that we can potentially disinfect our clothes: just by washing with detergent, by washing with detergent and disinfectant, or by just washing with water and then leaving it out to dry. All right, let's see if we get any answers. So yeah, here we go, we've had some answers in. This is generally what I thought as well. Washing with detergent and disinfectant seems like the best way. Disinfectant, its purpose is to remove viruses from surfaces, from clothes. So disinfectant should be killing these viruses, right? So this seems like the best way to clean the clothes. We've had someone saying just washing with water and leaving to dry. That's potentially that's an option. Any more coming in? So yeah, I thought washing with disinfectant would be best. In Chinese, the name for disinfectant is xiaodu, which literally means to kill bacteria and germs. And you would have thought that would be the best way. But I'm gonna bring you guys the answer now. I want you guys to go back and look at one of the graphs that I sent you. I've already shown you this graph, and remind you that viruses can generally die after 4 hours of just being left out. So I'm giving you a clue here as to the answer to this question. Any ideas from the listeners? So if viruses can generally die after 4 hours, what do you think actually will be the most effective way in removing viruses from your clothes? And for those of you, I think a couple of you have got it. Yeah, you chose the right answer. Actually, the best way to remove viruses is actually just to leave them out and dry them. So using detergent, remove 99% of the viruses. Bleach and disinfectant, detergent and bleach or disinfectant, remove 99.99%. And then just using plain old water with no disinfectant, no detergent, but then leaving them to dry for 20 hours, that removed even more. That removed 99.9992%. So that was actually the most effective way. And why? Again, because of this graph. We know very well that viruses generally will die on material, clothes-like material, after about 4 hours. So leaving it for 20 hours is definitely enough for that. So I'm gonna round off here. We've been just over 40 minutes. I've given you a very, very brief overview about the coronavirus, how big it is, whether or not air purifiers can filter out the virus and whether or not they pose any risk after they filtered the virus. And then I've talked a little bit about masks, surgical masks and N95 masks. Contrary to what the US Surgeon General is saying, these masks are just as effective as each other at preventing the transmission of influenza in the research case, but generally of viruses. So don't believe everything you read on Twitter. Again, don't believe me. You can go ahead and check the data that we've been posting. But that's a really, really important finding, that these two are actually just as effective as each other. We've also talked about maybe some other ways to make masks using perhaps this kind of material. Let me bring up a big picture so you guys can see now. There we go. So maybe using this kind of material, how good this is at capturing viruses. Not so good. I managed to capture about 20% roughly of viruses. And finally, I talked a little bit about other ways that we can potentially wash or disinfect our masks. And again, the most effective way is just to leave it for about 4 hours. And let me bring this graph up. This is probably the most important graph that we've got to show you guys today. Is viruses generally die after about 4 hours. And then finally, we talked about how to disinfect our clothes. And just like for masks, leaving them again for 4 hours or so is probably the most effective way at preventing the viruses or killing off the viruses. So there we go. We have a summary graphic here, which I will be showing you. It's a little bit difficult to read. There's a lot of information on there, but we'll be posting that again in the comments, and we'll be posting this more, which gives you a whole summary on everything I've just said today during this live stream. Let's move that to the side. And so this has everything you need to know about the coronavirus, about air purifiers, about masks, and also just about breathing safe and staying safe in general. And then finally, if you want to stay on top of all of this information, I suggest you all get on to our Facebook, our Twitter, and our Instagram. If you're viewing this on our page now, don't forget to like, and then you can stay up to date with all of these articles and all of this information that we've been writing about. So we have many articles on the coronavirus. We've put out about 10 in the past 2 weeks, where we're answering, do DIY masks work? What's the best material for DIY face masks? Can the coronavirus work for surgical masks, for N95 masks? Much more detail. I've given you a very brief overview today. You can find all the details in that page on our social media. So check us out: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and don't forget to follow us. So that's generally it from me today. I've given you a brief overview, and I think I'll leave the floor open to comments. So if any of you have had any questions, or if any of you have any comments or thoughts, let me know now, and then I'll go ahead hopefully and answer some of these questions. So give me a minute whilst I just collect all of these questions, and I will see about answering them when I can. Okay. Oh, we had some people in the comments adding their votes to the polls in the comments. Victor and Gary, yeah, number 3 for that question. Just washing with water and hanging for 20 hours. All right, then it looks like we don't have that many questions, which is great. Hopefully I've been able to answer the questions that you have and give you the information that you need. So on that note, let me leave it there, and I will say bye to you all. And any more questions, do remember to leave them in the comments, or find us on Facebook, message us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, WeChat if you're in China, and we will go ahead and hopefully answer any questions you have about viruses, air purifiers, masks. We are doing this as a social enterprise, Smart Air as a social enterprise. We are not focused on just trying to get rich from this kind of problem, but actually helping you guys breathe safe and protect yourself, especially during this period. So stay safe, breathe safe, and hopefully the information I've given you today will be very, very useful to you all. Thanks guys, this is Paddy from Beijing, from the Smarter office in Beijing. Be safe.